There's Bill Colarulo joining us on
By the
both.
way, I'm on Team JAKIB for linebacker. That's the upside. JAKIB finally staying healthy, finally turning the corner, finally getting better.
I'm
I
on
don't think
Team
there's much
Nakobe.
upside anywhere else.
I'm on Team Nakobe, but I just to be honest with everybody, my belief in the upside is dwindling, and it's dwindling fast.
Well, that's fair.
I think it's
That's
in him.
fair.
I'd love to see it, but I'm starting to lose all hope on Nakobe Dean. I hope he can be the player because we certainly need a better linebacking group. We need players at that position, and we really don't have it. I'm with you. It's the one thing Howie, I think, has gone too far on. And shit, we just talked about TJ Edwards. Is he the one that got away to Howie? Like, do you think Howie regrets that? Not if he didn't offer TJ?
I don't think he regrets it because I think he's devalued that position to such a degree.
I know,
And I
but the
think
way
that's my
Howie
point.
contract
He's
and
taken it too far.
I
He's
just
taken
think
it
about
too
the way
far.
Howie works a contract, though. I mean, TJ's making $7 million there. Knowing the way Howie would have worked it up, he would have been a $3 million cap hit, with dead cap years on the back, and it would have been cost him next to nothing to solidify your linebacking group. I just don't. I think Howie might be itching about that one. I really do.
Well, he hasn't shown it because,
of course he can't show it. He doesn't want people.
Well, I mean, he paid. The Devin White contract was a joke when they reported it. It was like
$7.5 million.
It's not even close to that. If you look at it, obviously he's not paying Oren Burks anything. He's near the veteran minimum. He's not paying Zach Ball anything. His was also a joke. His is the veteran minimum, and I think they reported that originally at $3.5 million. It was really $1.125 million, which is the veteran minimum. And there's some incentives in there if he gets on the field, which is fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But this is what you're talking. This is the core, and obviously Nakobe's on his rookie contract, so as a third round pick, he's not expensive. But this is what they're paying their linebackers. What does that tell you? What does that tell you?
It tells you that they don't give a
yes. There's no other way to look at it. And the only surprise about them being number 30 on that list that Bill
we've talked about it.
was we talked about it before, was that they weren't 32nd. Because nobody has put less assets into the linebacker position than the Philadelphia Eagles. Nobody. And as Nick Sirianni will say, you never want to be bottom 5 in anything in the NFL. Well, and I criticize Nick for being bottom 5 in motion. All right? Don't be bottom 5. Don't be bottom 5, Howie. Put something into the damn position.
Well, that's where the TJ, like, it's not like he got paid like Roquan Smith or like Patrick Queen. Like, he got paid a regular amount of money, $7 million or whatever it was. It's like, shoot, you could have just been competent at the price that you were probably comfortable going with. It wouldn't have changed any of your impact signings. Yeah. It wouldn't have changed how you had to build the roster.
The bizarre, and even the more bizarre part to me is so many Eagles fans think he wasn't good here. That's the most bizarre part.
Really? I've never heard that.
Oh, I get it all the time. He can't cover. He's slow. This,
where, on the Twitterverse? Well, the cesspool of Twitter?
Media. Yeah, I mean, it is a cesspool. Yeah, that's where I get most of my feedback, though. Unfortunately, I hate Twitter. X.com.
We have a more knowledgeable fan base on YouTube than we do on Twitter. I know because JAKIB has presence on both. And I read all of our comments on YouTube after the fact, even like when not the live comments, just people afterwards who comment on our videos or on our post. There's definitely a lot of people on our chat that really are great football minds. I love a lot. James Carver, he's in here. I mean, we have a lot of good people that know what the hell they're talking about. I get what you're saying. There's a portion of people who are, they just constantly looking for stuff, and they're the ones I think who live on Twitter the most. But I don't think we can blanket the fan base, based on them.
No, well, I try to catch myself. I try not to blanket everyone, but there's, since TJ took over, so we're talking about a 4-year sample size. If you're losing, so if you go back to 2020, which is the first year he played enough snaps to be graded by PFF, 19 out of 83 linebackers, 2021, 10 of 86, 2022, 6 of 81. And last season with a bad football team, 11 of 82. I mean, that's just solid, consistent football, and the Eagles had him and they found him and they developed him. And this is where I am with Reed Blankenship. So many people say, well, you got to bring in Justin Simmons. You got to bring in Eddie Jackson. Reed Blankenship played better than both of them last year. Does he need to stay on the field? Did he miss 3 games? Yes. He played better than both of them last year. I don't care that he was undrafted. He performed. He was one of the few players that performed at a consistent level on that crappy defense.
You know what bothers me about the linebacking position is that when you look at the competition of the Eagles, and when I say competition, I don't just mean the Cowboys, the Giants, and the Commanders. I mean the class of the NFC. They have great linebacking cores. Like the teams that are having success in the NFL, the 49ers, they have obviously tremendous. That game changed last year in the Super Bowl when Greenlaw went down. It completely changed the entire dynamic of the game when he went down. Now it was an injury that happened from him running on the field. But still, I mean, they have, Fred Warner. They have even the Detroit. Isn't the Detroit linebacking crew pretty dang good?
No, that's one of my issues with Detroit.
They did pick the guy in the first round, though, right?
Well, they took Jack Campbell in the
Yeah.
first round. He didn't play. I mean, maybe he's got some upside. Obviously, he didn't play to where they wanted him to play. Alex Anzalone is their starting linebacker, and he's okay, but he's sort of mediocre. He plays the most snaps. Derek Barnes, and they certainly probably want Jack Campbell to stay together to take that step forward this year. But no surprise, he struggled really badly in coverage. But at least you have some upside with Jack Campbell. Again, we're talking upside here. I'm talking about Nakobe Dean, and I still think Nakobe has some upside, but boy, the people hope betting on Devin White, man. I can't. That's just being a fan right there. I mean, you're ignoring everything he did in Tampa except for that playoff run.
Yeah, which was just too long ago. I mean, look, I hope Devin White turns out, but I am definitely in wait and see mode with him. I am more optimistic on Nakobe Dean than I am on Devin White for sure. So we'll see. We'll see how it turns out. I think you're overall right though that Howie has devalued the position too much, and you don't want to be bottom 5 like you said in anything, and he's certainly gone that route. So I hope he'll change it around at least and make a move. But is there anybody even out there to add? No, not really, right? I mean,
no, not at this stage. I mean, you can bring somebody in. That point of it's over. That point of getting a difference maker's over. Or at least somebody.
What's funny, John, is that like we have all now become so accustomed to devaluing the linebacker position, and I include beat reporters in this conversation. We hear of all these things. Oh, how he should sign coming into training camp. I hear more about signing a damn receiver when we have 2 of the top receivers in the NFL than I do about bolstering the linebacker position. I'm not saying we shouldn't add a receiver. All I'm saying is that nobody expects us to make a move for linebacker. Beat reporters, fans, nobody. They just don't expect it.
Well, and part of it is because we cover the Eagles. So we know they're not doing anything at
I know.
linebacker.
That's
So,
kind of what I'm saying. I mean, we know they're not doing it.
so that factors into our thought system pretty significantly. But yeah, and speaking of my brethren, I mean, many of them are high on Devin White, and I'm like, man, I, yeah, I don't get it. I don't get it. Nice guy. I hope he plays well.
Zach
But
Cunningham and Shaq Leonard are available, Johnny Mac. Oh, no.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I still remember Jody building up Shaq Leonard like it was, oh, they got to keep him away from Dallas. And, I don't know if you were producing at that point,
He did
Zander, but
absolutely nothing for
I
the
mean, I'm
Philadelphia
like,
Eagles.
yeah, don't worry about Shaq Leonard. Come on. I mean, there's this presumption that because somebody was a good player, that he's always going to be a good player. And that's some of the same thing with Devin White. Devin White was a phenomenal college prospect. He never lived up to the billing. At some point, you got to give it up. And it's the exact opposite of what we started this conversation about TJ Edwards. At some point, yeah, he's undrafted. At some point, you got to look at what he does on the field.
100%.
It's the opposite with those guys. Shaq Leonard was a great player. Yeah, back surgery, shouldn't have been on the
Remember when he
field
signed that?
last
Didn't he
year.
sign that massive contract, Shaq
Yeah.
Leonard, a little bit ago? Carver
Yeah.
brings up a great point here, by the way. Sadly, the Cooper DeJean pick further showed how linebacker was not a priority. All 5 top linebackers were still on the board. Eagles opted to go with another defensive back. I'm not knocking the pick. I'm just showing that in a way, it does highlight that they could care less about the linebacker position. You remember everybody wanted Edgerrin Cooper, the Texas A&M guy. There's a couple other ones out there. I mean, and then you talk about it all the time when they took Jalix Hunt, and they could have taken Peyton.
Yeah,
Wilson,
I would have. That's where I would have taken Peyton.
Yeah,
Wilson.
I mean,
and
now
and
he's wearing the green dot in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and now he has a lot of injury concerns. So, he's probably the best linebacker in the draft if he had no issues. And he was sitting there late in the 3rd round. I forget where Wilson went. I'd have to look it up, but man, that would have been the perfect chance to get a potential somewhat, difference-making linebacker, but they don't care. They don't care. There's no other way to judge it than they don't care.
Has Devin White played 5 seasons now in the NFL? Yeah, right, because he played out the 5th-year option. They picked it up. Yeah, I mean, this is where I'm just like, I don't Scott says White is 26 years old. He's played 5 years, though, in the NFL, and he had 4 or 5 good games in his rookie year.
He had 3 great games in the playoff. And that's where it all, so much of it stems from that. It really does. It's bizarre. It's one of those things where it's bizarre. And I always say, and Bill mentioned PFF, and Jody and I used to talk about it. And you can, if you understand what PFF is trying to do, I think it's a very valuable tool if you understand the context of it.
Which I do.
But if you're looking at it just from a large perspective, as Nick Sirianni would say, a 30,000-foot view, if they say somebody's playing well, he's probably playing well. If they say somebody's a top 10 linebacker, probably playing well. If they say somebody's a bottom 10 linebacker, he's probably playing poorly. They graded 82 linebackers last year. Devin White was 80th. He was 82nd of 84 stopping the run. He was in 2022. He was 74th of 81 linebackers. In 2021, he was 79 of 86.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
In 2022, he was 62 of 83. In 2019, his rookie season, where people think he was good, he was 68 of 90. I used to tell Jody all the time, it was one of the greatest anomalies I've ever seen in the NFL. In their run to the Super Bowl, he was unbelievable.
Yeah, and our fans are talking about it in the chat. White made crucial stops. And then, Scott answered back to me. The year Tampa won the Super Bowl, White was dominant. He was, Scott. He really was. But that was 2019. I mean, we can't just forget about the last 4 years
And he
since
was
then.
terrible during the regular season and played well in the
Yeah,
postseason.
that's right.
Now he deserves all the credit in the world, but whether it's Nick Foles having a historic run to a Super Bowl here, whether it's Timmy Smith having the greatest Super Bowl of all time as a running back to that point, it doesn't mean they're good players over 17, 18 games. He had a good run. The vast majority of his 5 years have been a disaster. A disaster. Or I could lie to you.
And Green Bay, who didn't have a great linebacking core last year at all, they're the ones who drafted Edger and Cooper, so they at least are showing that they're trying to fix the position. Our buddy James Carver said, I think Wilson went a few picks before us. No, I think he went a couple picks after us. Is that right, Johnny Mac?
I believe so, but I have to look at I know Andy Weidel
I thought I
drafted
remembered
him.
him going like 2 or 3 picks after us because the Steelers were right there and they swooped him up right after us.
Yeah, I remember Andy Weidel drafted him. I'll look it up. He went 98th. The Eagles took
Jalen at 96.
94th.
94th, yeah.
And Peyton went 98th to Pittsburgh and Andy Weidel, which, told me something. Not that Andy's in control, but, Howie, not the one valuing linebacker, let's be honest.
Yeah.
And look, he had some medical things, but I always talk with Pittsburgh, UPMC, University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, one of the top in the country when it comes to sports doctors. Dr. James Bradley, one of the best in the business, even though you may hear some things about the Chris Maragos thing. WWE sends their people to UPMC to get medically cleared. When they clear somebody, it means something. If the Steelers cleared him, I don't have some. He also had some off-the-field issues from a personal standpoint, so a lot of it factors into it. But in the 3rd round, and here's the thing about Alex Hunt, like nobody talks about him because the assumption is we're going to put him off here. We're going to
that's what the whole thing around him has been, and that's what the expectation is.
Yeah. So you're redshirting somebody and saying maybe he turns into a player down the road. Maybe he's even a natural. Maybe he gets on the field because Vic will be like, screw you. I'll play him if he can play and rush the passer. But, maybe it works out great. But, if you're projecting the guy to redshirt and you got a player that could be a day 1 starter at 94th overall, and Peyton Wilson could be a day 1 starter here. Day 1 as a 3rd round pick. I guarantee he'd be the most talented linebacker they have. Guarantee you that.
I mean, SMD says, but to use a 3rd for that. I mean, we used it for Alex Hunt, SMD. He's going to sit on the bench. We're not even expecting the guy to hit the field. So I get what you're saying, but I'd rather do that and have the upside or have a player that can play than taking a guy that's going to, sit on the bench for 3 years, and that's the expectation. Scott hits back here, and I agree with Scott. He's like, I get it. I totally agree. I'm hoping, since he's still young, with the change of scenery and better coaching, he can resurrect. Scott, I have 2 responses. As a fan, I'm with you. All we can do is hope. As an analyst of the team and talking to a reporter and John McMullen, who's not here to be a fan, he's here to report on the team, hope is not a strategy. So you got to criticize Howie Roseman for believing too much in hope and not addressing the needs of the position. So we'll see how it turns out. Linebacker.
And I'll say this about Tampa Bay. They got a pretty damn good defensive coach.
Yes, they do. Todd Bowles, who shut down our quarterback twice in the playoffs in the last 3 years.
So, and he got there in 2019, Todd Bowles, which is the exact year that Devin White got there. And by the way, Devin White loves Todd Bowles. Still, we talked to him about Todd Bowles. Loves him. And he benched him. He benched him not because he wanted to, because he had to. And that is a very good. If you're talking about, when people talk about best defensive coordinators, Vic's going to be in that conversation. Jim Schwartz is going to be in that conversation, former Eagles DC. Todd Bowles is also in that conversation. That's one of the best defensive coaches in football.
Yep, absolutely. SMD, you and I were saying the same thing. Sorry, I didn't interpret your comment correctly. That's where I'm with you. I would have taken Wilson over the project and Jalix Hunt. But let's get to our commercial break. Scott says that's alarming that Bowles benched him. It really is. I mean, that's where you know, you might be an Eagle fan and you might be upset that John isn't high on the player, but John is his reasoning is founded in truth. I mean, the guy has been bad for 4 years. You heard the PFF rankings, and I know it's not everything, but if he was a top linebacker in the league, I can assure you he wouldn't be graded that low by them. So, you know, you don't have to take it as gospel, but it is definitely alarming. Let's get to our commercial break. We'll come back. We'll talk about some defensive stats. Let's see what Johnny Mack thinks Bryce Huff could do, what Josh Sweat will do this year, even what Nolan Smith will do, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, some other guys we'll talk about. And then I also want to run by the top 10 22-man rosters, the starting 22s that ESPN Plus put out. They had the Eagles ranked 10th on that list. I thought we'd be a little higher, but I think that defense is weighing us down. So we'll do all that next. If you're in the chat, we appreciate you for being here. All the comments, great comments as always. We appreciate you guys. Make sure you drop a like on the shows. It's the best thing you can do to help us grow. And stay tuned. Birds 365. We'll be right back.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.